Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel General Hospital today. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The weight of the day seemed to have settled into the very walls of the Metro Court Hotel, the plush carpets and gleaming surfaces doing little to absorb the palpable tension that had become the town's primary currency. In a corner of the bar, strategically chosen for its relative seclusion and clear sightlines, Michael Corinthos sat with a glass of amber liquid that he had been nursing for the better part of an hour. It wasn't the whiskey he sought, but a moment of stillness, a futile attempt to quiet the cacophony in his mind. The ongoing saga of his family, his company, and the ever-present specter of his father's legacy was a constant hum, but today, a single piercing note cut through the noise: Willow. His wife, the mother of his child, the quiet center of his increasingly chaotic universe, was trapped in a nightmare not of her making. The false confession to murder that had been coerced from her, a desperate act to protect their son Wiley, from a past she thought she had buried, had cast a long dark shadow over their lives. Michael had been fighting with every resource at his disposal, legal, financial, and the sheer unyielding force of Corinthos' will, to dismantle the case against her. But the system was a labyrinth, and their enemies, both seen and unseen, seemed always one step ahead. He felt the gnawing frustration of a man trying to punch through fog, his efforts powerful but ultimately dissipated by an intangible, suffocating mist. He didn't need to look up to know who had entered the room. The shift in the atmosphere was enough. Drew Kane moved through the space with the quiet, purposeful gait of a man who had spent a significant portion of his life navigating hostile environments. There was a stillness to him now, a stark contrast to the turbulent, confused man who had returned to Port Charles believing himself to be Drew for so long. Since the reclamation of his true identity as Jason Morgan, that stillness had deepened, becoming less of a mask and more a reflection of a core self that had been reassembled, piece by painful piece. He was, in many ways, more Jason than he had ever been allowed to be, direct, unflinching, and possessed of a clarity that cut through the complexities others created. Michael watched as Drew approached, his expression unreadable. They had a complicated history woven together by shared trauma, business, and a deep, abiding love for the same small boy, Scout, Drew's daughter. But in this moment they were united by a single cause: freeing Willow. "Drew," Michael greeted, his voice tight with a fatigue that sleep could not cure. "Any news?" Drew didn't bother with pleasantries or a drink. He simply took the seat opposite Michael, his eyes scanning the room once, a habitual sweep, before locking onto Michael's. The intensity in that gaze was enough to make Michael straighten up, setting his glass down with a soft click on the polished wood of the table. "I've been going over everything," Drew began, his voice low and even. "The timeline, the forensics, the witness statements that don't add up. I've been looking at it from every angle, trying to find the crack, the one piece of the puzzle that doesn't fit the picture the DA is trying to paint." Michael leaned forward, a spark of desperate hope igniting in his chest. "And? Did you find something? A new witness? A flaw in the evidence chain?" Drew shook his head slowly, a gesture that was not negative, but profoundly deliberate. "It's not about what I found in the files, Michael. It's about what I know." He paused, letting the words hang in the air between them. The ambient noise of the hotel, the distant clink of glassware, the murmur of other patrons, seemed to recede into a dull roar, the world narrowing to this table, this conversation. "I know you've been through every document 100 times, Michael said, a hint of impatience creeping into his tone. "We all have. What is it that you know that the rest of us don't?" Drew's gaze was unwavering, a laser focused on the heart of the matter. He took a slow breath, as if measuring the weight of the words he was about to speak. Then, with a clarity that was both shocking and absolute, he said them. 7 words. 7 words that sliced through the convoluted legal strategies, the whispered rumors, the layers of fear and doubt that had accumulated around Willow's case like layers of grime. "I know Willow is innocent. I remember." For a moment the words didn't land. They hung in the air, simple and declarative, and Michael's brain, conditioned to complexity and obstruction, struggled to process their stark simplicity. He blinked. "You remember?" "Remember what?" Drew's expression did not change. "Everything. That night. The parking garage. I was there." The air was sucked from Michael's lungs. He felt as if he had been physically struck. What are you talking about? You weren't there. The security footage, the reports, you were nowhere near that garage when it happened. The police cleared you. We cleared you. I wasn't me, Drew stated, his voice dropping even lower, taking on a gravelly quality that was pure Jason Morgan. I was still him. I was still Drew Kane, living his life, operating in his world. But my memories, Jason's memories, they've been returning in fragments, like pieces of a shattered mirror slowly being glued back together. For a long time that night was just a dark spot, a void. But it's not a void anymore. It's a memory. A clear one. Michael could only stare, his mind reeling. He was a man of business, of contracts and corporate takeovers. He dealt in facts, in evidence that could be documented and presented. This was something else entirely. This was the murky, unpredictable territory of stolen identities and recovered memories, a world his father and men like Jason had always inhabited, but one he had tried to keep at arm's length. Start from the beginning, Michael managed to say, his voice a hoarse whisper. Tell me everything. Drew leaned back, his gaze turning inward, focusing on a point in the past that was only now coming into sharp relief. It was the night of the Aurora Media fundraiser, the one at the hospital. I was Drew, running the company, engaged to Sam, trying to build a life that felt real. But there were always echoes, feelings I couldn't explain, knowledge that didn't fit. That night I'd had a meeting run late. I was heading to my car, which was parked on the lower level of the garage. I was preoccupied, thinking about the merger with Deception, about the pressure from your mother. He paused, his jaw tightening. I heard it before I saw it. A raised voice. A woman's strained with fear. Then a man's aggressive, threatening. I moved toward the sound, using the concrete pillars for cover. And that's when I saw them. Who? Michael breathed, his heart hammering against his ribs. Willow, Drew said. And the name was a confirmation that sent a jolt through Michael. And the victim. They were arguing. He had her by the arm, his grip was tight. I could see the panic in her eyes. She was trying to pull away, but he was stronger. He was saying things, terrible things. About her son. About what would happen if she didn't do what he said. Michael felt a cold fury begin to boil in his veins. The man in question, a blackmailer and a predator, had been a shadowy figure in their lives. His threats the source of Willow's ultimate desperation. To hear that he had laid hands on her, that he had confronted her in that dark, isolated place, made the abstract horror of the situation terrifyingly concrete. What did you do? Michael asked, his fists clenching on the table. I was about to intervene, Drew continued, his voice flat, devoid of the emotion that was churning within Michael. I took a step out from behind the pillar. But then it happened too fast. He shoved her. It wasn't a hard shove, not meant to cause serious harm, but she was off balance, terrified. She stumbled back, her arms flailing. There was a metal stanchion, one of those removable posts for directing traffic. Her head connected with the corner of it. It was a sickening sound. Drew's eyes closed for a brief second, as if reliving the auditory memory. She went down. Hard. She was unconscious before she even hit the ground. The man, he froze for a second, staring at her. He hadn't meant for that to happen. It was an accident, born of his aggression and her panic. But then his expression changed. The shock turned to calculation. He looked around, saw that they were seemingly alone, and he made a decision. He decided to frame her, Michael whispered, the pieces clicking into a horrifying logical sequence. He did more than that, Drew said, his eyes opening, cold and hard. He saw her lying there, unconscious. He saw the opportunity. If she was dead, she couldn't talk. She couldn't accuse him. And her confession, which he had already coerced, would be the perfect, tidy end to the story. He could pin his own crime on a dead woman. So he knelt down. He checked her pulse. And then he took a handkerchief from his pocket, wrapped it around his hands, and he finished the job. He made sure she wouldn't wake up. The clinical, detached way Drew described the murder was more chilling than any outburst of emotion could have been. It was the testimony of a soldier, an operative, someone who had seen the worst of humanity and could report on it with stark accuracy. And you saw all of this? Michael asked, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and a burgeoning, dizzying hope. I saw it, Drew confirmed. From my position, hidden in the shadows between two cars, I saw the whole thing. I saw him stage the scene. I saw him wipe the stanchion, place her fingerprints in specific places. I saw him leave the anonymous tip that would lead the police to her confession letter. I was a ghost, witnessing a perfect crime being constructed in real time. Why didn't you stop him? The question was out of Michael's mouth before he could stop it, born of a spouse's anguish. Why didn't you help her? Drew didn't flinch from the accusation in the question. 2 reasons. The first was practical. I was unarmed. He was larger, agitated, and had just proven himself capable of lethal violence. A direct confrontation in that enclosed space was a gamble I wasn't sure I could win, and if I lost, the truth dies with me. The second reason was me. He tapped his temple. In that moment, watching him, something broke loose in my mind. A flood of images, sensations, gunfire, the smell of the ocean, a woman's face I knew but couldn't name. It was a psychic earthquake. I was disoriented, my own identity crumbling as Jason's memories began to violently surface. By the time I had regained my bearings, he was gone and she was gone. The sirens were already wailing in the distance. He looked directly at Michael, his gaze filled with a profound and ancient regret. I failed her in that moment, Michael. I know that. The man I was then, the fractured, confused individual, he wasn't capable of the decisive action that was needed. He hid and he watched and he let a monster walk away. It is a failure I will have to live with for the rest of my life. The confession was staggering. It wasn't just a piece of exculpatory evidence. It was a complete rewriting of the night's events from an unimpeachable source. Drew Kane, a decorated Navy SEAL, a man whose word carried immense weight in any courtroom, was an eyewitness to the truth. This changes everything, Michael said, his mind already racing. The corporate CEO taking over from the horrified husband. You have to go to the police. You have to tell them what you saw. You can get the charges dropped today. Drew shook his head, a slow, grim motion. It's not that simple. What do you mean it's not that simple? Michael's voice rose, the hope curdling into frustration. You just gave me the key to her freedom. You saw the real killer. You can identify him. And what is my testimony? Drew asked, his tone turning sharp. It's the memory of a man who at the time was living under a stolen identity. A man who has only recently begun to untangle his own psyche. A good defense attorney would tear me to shreds on the stand. They would say my memories are unreliable. A fabrication born of trauma. A desperate story concocted to help the wife of a powerful friend. They would paint me as unstable, as confused, as a liar. They would ask why I didn't come forward immediately. They would crucify me, and in doing so they would taint the entire story, making Willow look guiltier by association. The logic was cold, hard, and infuriatingly correct. Michael slumped back in his chair, the brilliant, fleeting hope dashed against the rocks of legal reality. So what are you saying? We do nothing. We let her sit in a cell, knowing we have the truth, and we do nothing with it. No, Drew said, his voice firm. We do not do nothing. We use this. But we use it intelligently. My testimony on its own is a risky double-edged sword. But my testimony as a guide, that's something else. Now that I know what really happened, I know where to look. I know what evidence is fake. I know where the staging was clumsy. I know there will be a flaw, a thread we can pull. The killer was smart, but he was also rushed and panicked. He made a mistake. I just have to find it. He leaned forward again, his intensity burning brightly. I know the exact spot I was standing. I know the angle I was looking from. I can tell the PS exactly where to search for secondary security cameras he might have missed, for trace evidence that was overlooked because the initial investigation was pointed squarely at Willow. I can reconstruct his escape route. My memory is the map, Michael. We just have to follow it to the proof. The strategic shift in perspective was a masterstroke. Drew wasn't offering himself as a witness. He was offering himself as the ultimate investigator, one with a perfect first-hand view of the crime. He was turning his personal failure into their greatest tactical advantage. The Diaz case is a house of cards, Drew continued. It's built on a coerced confession and circumstantial evidence that he planted. We don't need to prove Willow's innocence to a moral certainty. We just need to prove reasonable doubt. And better yet, we need to point a very strong, very credible finger at the real killer. We need to give the DA a better, more convincing story to tell. And now we have that story. A new kind of energy was flowing through Michael now. Not the frantic energy of desperation, but the focused, determined energy of a man with a clear objective and a viable path to achieve it. The fog had lifted. The enemy had a face. Who was it, Drew? Michael asked, his voice low and deadly serious. You haven't said his name. Drew held his gaze for a long moment. It's better you don't know. Not yet. If you know, it will be written all over your face every time you see him. It will change how you interact with him. He'll sense it. We can't afford to spook him. We need him to feel safe, to feel like he's gotten away with it. Complacency makes people sloppy. We need him to be sloppy. The wisdom in this was undeniable, yet it was torture for Michael. To know that the man who had murdered in cold blood and framed the woman he loved for it was walking free, possibly someone he interacted with regularly, was an almost unbearable burden. What do we do first? Michael asked, deferring to Drew's expertise in a way he rarely deferred to anyone. First, we bring in one person. Just one. Someone we trust implicitly, who has the skills to act on this information without raising any red flags. Drew didn't even need to say the name. They were both thinking it. Dante, Michael said. Drew nodded. Dante. He's a detective. He knows how to work an investigation off the books. He'll know how to follow the trail I give him without alerting the entire PCPD. We meet with him. We tell him everything. And then we start to dismantle this thing piece by piece. The plan was set. The 7 shocking words. I know Willow is innocent. I remember. Had not been a magic wand, instantly solving all their problems. But they had been a key, unlocking a door Michael hadn't even known was there. Behind that door was not freedom, not yet, but a path. A difficult, dangerous, and uncertain path, but a path nonetheless. For the first time in months, Michael felt a sense of direction. The helplessness was receding, replaced by a cold, sharp purpose. He looked at Drew, this man who was both a stranger and a brother, a ghost from a past life and the most tangible link to his wife's future. Thank you, Michael said, the words inadequate for the magnitude of what had just been shared. It wasn't just information. It was a confession of profound personal failure, offered up as a weapon for their shared fight. Drew simply gave a curt nod. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when she's home. He stood up, the meeting clearly over. I'll set up the meeting with Dante. Be ready. This is just the beginning. As Drew walked away, melting back into the landscape of the hotel, Michael remained at the table, the empty glass before him a forgotten relic. The world had not changed. Willow was still in a cell. The legal machinery was still grinding against her. But everything had changed. He had the truth. It was a secret, a dangerous, volatile secret that had to be handled with the utmost care. But it was real. It was a foundation upon which he could finally build a real defense, not just a legal argument but a crusade. The 7 words echoed in his mind, a mantra of salvation and a promise of vengeance. I know Willow is innocent. I remember. They were no longer just words, they were a battle cry. The war for Willow's freedom had just entered a new, decisive phase, and for the first time Michael Corinthos allowed himself to believe, truly believe, that they could win. Drew had been restless all morning, pacing through the living room of the Quartermain mansion with a look that was far from his usual calm demeanor. Michael sat across from him, watching silently, his gut tightening with unease. Something was off. Drew had been avoiding eye contact, his fists clenching every few seconds, and Michael could sense that whatever was about to come out of Drew's mouth wasn't going to be easy to hear. The tension between them was thick, the kind that made even the air feel heavy. When Drew finally stopped pacing, his voice came out rough, almost trembling as he muttered, Michael, there's something you need to know about Willow. Michael's heart skipped. What are you talking about? He asked, his voice low, careful. He wasn't sure if he was ready for another blow. After everything with Nina, with the lies, the near-death moments, he just wanted peace. But the look on Drew's face told him that peace was the last thing he was about to get. Drew hesitated, his eyes darting away before locking on Michael again. She didn't do it. Willow is innocent. he said quietly but firmly, each word carrying a weight that shook Michael to his core. Michael stood abruptly, disbelief flickering across his face. What do you mean she's innocent? You said you saw the evidence yourself. Drew cut him off with a sharp shake of his head. I was wrong, Michael. I made a mistake. And it's worse than that. I was set up to believe she was guilty. Michael blinked, trying to process the words, his chest tightening. Set up? By who? Drew exhaled harshly, raking a hand through his hair. Nina, he finally said. The name hung between them like a grenade that had just been pulled. Michael's jaw clenched. You're saying my mother-in-law framed my wife? His tone was biting, his anger barely contained. Drew nodded, his expression grim. Not framed exactly, but she let you believe Willow was the one who leaked the SEC information. She knew it would cause chaos between you, me, Carly, everyone. And she didn't stop it. Michael's hands curled into fists. She knew? He asked through gritted teeth. Drew nodded again. She knew everything. And she stayed silent. Michael turned away, trying to steady his breathing. The anger bubbling in his chest was threatening to explode. You're telling me Nina let us tear each other apart while she stood by and said nothing? Drew's reply was soft, remorseful. I wish I could say it wasn't true. But yes. Michael closed his eyes, swallowing hard, his mind racing through every fight he and Willow had had. Every tear she'd shed thinking she was the reason their family was falling apart. She's been blaming herself for months, Michael muttered bitterly. And all this time. Drew took a cautious step closer. Michael, I didn't come here to make this worse. I came because I can't keep this secret anymore.